Next slide, please. Thanks. I realised that in those moments, instead of arguing logically, I need to listen. And so when he told me about that sketch and his user, that was like a light bulb moment for me. It was an invitation to bond and understand deeper. And so right then, my response was, oh, tell me more about what happened to you that time, like when you showed the design to users. Being a designer, so it's not about mock-ups or anything to do with the tools that we use to create them, but the interaction between humans, and our empathy and our communication. And there's nowhere where these human qualities and emotions and pressures meet more than in the design review with stakeholders. And it's really important that we invest in these human qualities because they're what stay true to us as and relevant to our profession, regardless of how design tooling evolves over the next few years. Next slide, please, Dima. So I'm Rachel. As Dima mentioned, I lead experience design at Synchron UK. We have design centres in London, Belfast and Glasgow. And Synchron is a technology consultancy. We specialise in financial services, often in very large organisations. Naturally, a big part of this job is navigating stakeholder conversations, often with people who aren't familiar with design or user experience at all. And so through that, I've seen firsthand how often the pushback that you get when you're showing designs isn't always really about the design itself. So today I'm going to share a few things that I've learnt myself from those situations, and we'll leave today with some practical tools of what you can do in your next design review when you're getting pushback from your stakeholders and when explaining your design thinking behind them just isn't working. So we'll start with an easy question. Yep, great, thanks. We'll start with an easy question. Show of hands, who has ever had a stakeholder pushback on their designs? Or even their ideas that you've gone to a meeting with? Yeah, pretty familiar scenario for all of us working in the creative industries. So what tends to happen when we get that pushback? We defend our designs and we explain the rationale behind the design thinking. And sometimes, do you find it as well, that maybe they just still don't get it and actually all this explaining is actually making it worse? So what does it feel like in those moments? Anyone want to call out any words of what it feels like when you're trying to defend your designs?
Demoralising.
Demoralising, yes.
Frustrating.
Frustrating, yeah. Anything else?
You feel marginalised.
Marginalised.
It's tiring.
It is, it's tiring, isn't it? Yeah. Because we put so much thought into those designs and it feels like the stakeholders just don't understand this. Like those designs, they were backed by design theory and data and our years of creative expertise. And it doesn't seem to go anywhere. And it's frustrating and it's demoralising, as you were saying. Next slide. So should we have a little cathartic session for a few minutes? If you could tell the person next to you or on the table, if your groups are free, tell them about the most frustrating piece of feedback that you've had recently. We'll just have a couple of minutes. Timer says the 2 minutes up, so the time is up. Thanks. Hope that was all very therapeutic for you. And what I'd like you to reflect on to yourself as we go through the rest of the talk is if you get the sense of anything that they were pushing back on, maybe wasn't necessarily on the designs themselves. It was something else going on underneath the surface. 'Cause that's what I want to talk about today. It's the something else that is often underlying the pushback. But also how you as designers, with your unique skills, can take control of those moments and turn that situation around. So I will tell you about a time when I had one of these high tension design review sessions with a client. So I was presenting a dashboard UI design to a group, a mix of stakeholders and users. And one of the users asked quite calmly, pointed at the screen and went, "Oh, what's that figure meant to represent?" And I explained what it was. It was a financial value and a big card at the top of the dashboard. It was a key metric that they're typically very familiar with from their day-to-day work. But I'd accidentally made a typo. I'd missed one of the zeros off the end. And I thought, I laughed it off. Easy mistake to make, and thinking that would be the end of it, and we could just get on with talking about the designs, and I could get some feedback on the layout, which is what I wanted from that conversation. But no, that was not going to be the case. Another stakeholder in the room just completely went off on one at that moment, and was saying how we absolutely must come to these design sessions with real data on the mock-ups. All the calculations must add up. Users won't know what we're showing them. And I was like, whoa, it was a typo. I explained. They got it. Can we move on? But I thought, keep the clients happy. We went away and we promised to always put real data in the designs going forward, and we'll double check the maths and make sure it's all correct before we show it to them again. Anyway, time went on, and the designers quickly found it was frustrating and time consuming to have to populate realistic data, realistic numbers and realistic data, add up all the complex calculations on all the designs that they were producing. We work in financial services. It's quite data heavy UIs that we're producing. And I hired them as creatives, not as accountants. So we started cutting some corners here and there just to save a bit of time and effort. And we thought, it's okay, we'll take our designs to the review sessions and just make sure we explain them well enough. Make sure we're communicating the intent behind the designs. We'll be okay. But that stakeholder noticed, of course he did. And he derailed every meeting whenever we showed the designs and he spotted any kind of mistake. And he'd call us out in front of large audiences for not using the real data again. And it was getting embarrassing. And when I tried to explain logically how it's a bit of a distraction for us, we're investing time in irrelevant details when really we're here to talk about the interactions. And I just couldn't understand, why couldn't he see what I was saying, and why won't he let this go? Then, a few months later, in a different meeting, he made a passing comment. He'd mentioned that how long before we joined the project, he had done a sketch of a UI one time. And he's not a designer, it's not his specialist area, but he used the tools he had at the time to do what he needed to do, sketch up a UI. to take to a user and show them and get some feedback on his idea. But when he had shown his sketch to a user, that user did get confused over what some placeholder numbers were. And, it was, for him that time, it was a complete distraction from the conversation that he wanted. He couldn't get any real feedback from his sketch because the user was too caught up in the fact that the numbers didn't add up. So then I realised this stakeholder, who I thought was being irrational, was actually drawing from past experience and anticipating, assuming that the same thing would happen again. And in his own way, he was trying to prevent that mistake from happening again. Okay. So when I was explaining logically, I was responding to what he was saying, but I wasn't understanding what he was really worried about. I thought I was having a rational discussion about design efficiency, but he thought he was protecting us from a problem that he had personally experienced. And if I'd recognised that sooner, I'd have stopped trying to win the argument. I would have tried to understand his underlying concern. So, next slide, please. Thanks. I realised that in those moments, instead of arguing logically, I need to listen. And so when he told me about that sketch and his user, that was like a light bulb moment for me. It was an invitation to bond and understand deeper. And so right then, my response was, oh, tell me more about what happened to you that time, like when you showed the design to users. Oh, and then he opens up and he chats away, and finally he felt heard. And now we've got something to bond over. We can bond over that common ground that we both value, sharing designs with users and getting focused and actionable feedback. And now in our designs, we still don't add up all the numbers, but we do make that extra little bit of effort in those key moments when the design is likely to reach a wider audience and there's higher potential for confusion. And in return, he's dialed back the criticism as well. And quite crucially, design review meetings with users and stakeholders, they stay more on track. Yeah. And so what's changed in how I approach pushback? One, I treat strong reactions as signals of an insight that I can uncover, not an obstacle that needs to be overcome. I don't jump to the defense too quickly. I think, oh, there's probably something behind that reaction. And I take a moment to reflect back before responding, using that as an opportunity to ask a question and learn something I didn't know before. So let's turn this into a practical toolkit that you can take to your next design review session. The first thing is listen out for emotion, because that's probably a signal that there's something going on underneath. It might be some past pain. It might be the fear that we're taking a big risk. It might be that the trust just isn't quite there yet. It might be that there's competing incentives going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. But if you get curious before you get defensive, you get the chance to find those things out. Like the emotion that you detect in their voice is your trigger to ignite curiosity. And you can try and dig out what's going on beneath the surface. A good technique is to reflect back what they said. Like you can literally use the words that they said back at them and ask them to explain it more. If I had done that very first time that stakeholder had challenged me about the numbers that were up on the screen that I was showing, I'd have learned so much more. If I'd gone, oh, you mentioned you think users won't understand what we're showing them if the numbers aren't quite right. Can you tell me more about why you think that might be the case? Then I'd have landed on that insight much sooner. I'd have learned more about him. We'd have bonded more. I'd have learned more about the users and their perception of things. So you can use that opportunity of asking them questions to coach deeper insights out of them in those moments. It's kind of like when you're doing user research, but you're doing user research actually with your stakeholders. And ultimately, your goal in those moments is to solve the concern, not necessarily even the design at that point, and to really try and solve it together, like as a partnership. The underlying technique that you'd be putting into practice in those moments is called active listening. And active listening is an absolute power skill that can be used in so many situations in professions like ours, where communication is a really big part of it. And you can use these active listening skills to build rapport with the people around you and demonstrate leadership. So in a two-way conversation, active listening is around listening to understand, not just to reply. It's about using your opportunity to speak in a conversation to explore the meaning behind someone else's reaction and not just the words they say. And sometimes it even means holding back on your own perspective long enough to properly understand theirs. How are we doing for time? Have we got time for a 5-minute exercise? Yeah, we've got a little activity just to try some of these active listening techniques out. I'm thinking if you could get into groups of 3 or thereabouts, or whoever you're sat with, and we'll just do a really, really quick task here. If each of you could take on one of the roles, either speaker, listener, or observer, then I'd like the speaker to tell the listener about, it could be a recent design review, or it could be a difficult presentation that you had to give, or an interview or something that you did. Just to tell them about it. It doesn't have to be something that went wrong. It could be just anything that comes to mind. And I'd like the listener to demonstrate active listening. So it might be when there's a pause in the conversation, you could ask an open question to coach a little bit more insight out of them. It might be that you reflect back what you heard to clarify your understanding. It could be that you simply summarise what you heard someone say. Or even as the speaker is speaking, you can use some silent acknowledgement, like nods or facial expressions, or anything like a little noise of encouragement, like to encourage them along. But what I don't want the listener to do in this particular time is to jump in and add your own view, or respond by telling a similar thing that happened to them, because this exercise is all about making the speaker feel heard and enhancing your own understanding. And it's not the easiest thing to do, but that's why we have to be quite conscious and intentional about applying active listening. And then I'm thinking at the end of, there's 2 minutes, I'd like the observer to reflect on what it was like observing an active listening conversation. Like, what effects did it have on the conversation? Did it help the speaker open up more? Did it help people feel more comfortable, less comfortable? You can discuss it amongst yourselves in the 5-minute exercise, if that's okay. And maybe we'll share a few reflections back afterwards. But does that sound okay to try a little exercise?
So in the case, the scenarios have to be, can they be realized?
Yeah. The scenario doesn't matter too much. It's just about telling the other person about an experience that happened to you.
Thank you very much. Oh, we have to go now.
Oh, thank you for coming along. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, guys, yeah.
Nice. Let's continue. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Did you finish?
No, wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, next slide if that's okay. I'm really interested to learn from you what that experience was like. Would anyone who was observing the conversation like to share what it was like? I saw a hand up at the back first, but I don't know if
I don't know if my scenario is going to be useful for anyone, but it's basically I had an issue in a school in particular. I'm not naming names but it's all I was doing was seeking some sort of feedback, to improve. I was being proactive after a period of absence, and the people the LSAs, learning support assistants, were willing to give me feedback, but then they went and told my mentor about this, and I felt like that I was put in the wrong for something that I should be doing. You would think in schools they're very collegiate, everyone's got each other's backs, but when the school culture is toxic like that, it can really eat away at you, and it did. I felt like really, really traumatized by the experience, and I'm still trying to overcome it. But in terms of who to reach out to for feedback, and also defending yourself, because you were in a situation where you had to defend yourself. Even though I walked away from that negative experience getting, empty-handed, I still feel like I still did the right thing, even though other people might not see it. But inside, I know that I did the right thing. So,
Yeah, that sounds like that was a really difficult scenario that you were in. Yeah. Yeah. As the two of you were talking together, what was it like to have an active listening experience and having someone sort of listen and respond to what you were saying?
Only one question to him is that, have you clarified that, once you have given the materials and those things, then did you ask the do you have any questions for them for him actually? And I don't know like whether he clarified the things correctly to them or not. That's why they will reach out to the mentor and report him badly maybe. And usually at that time they will not respond, but at the back they will say like the things are not went well. That is what.
So what I've learned is if you have a problem, for me anyway, I've at the little bit of light that I've got, or the little learning that I've got from that is if you have a problem with someone, just to say to them instead of because I can do that. If they if they had a problem, rather than actually sort of being two-faced for want of a better.
Yeah.
They could have to have prevented all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
That audience member. So in a way, I know it's a really difficult experience, but in a way, you were able to learn from that here. So I've done the same, and I brought my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a chance to learn and bond, isn't it, by looking at it differently. What was the active listening experience like in your?
So I was an observer as I was here, and this was the person explaining, and you were the listener. So it was frustrating to be the observer because I wanted to jump in. But I had to stop myself, But it was interesting to see the interaction, and I think active listening is core, actually, to what we're doing. And outside of that, as you say, I think it's probably the most important skill we can all learn at the moment is actively listening. But also, I think to how you responded there, I think sometimes we don't have to ask a question, we can sympathise, empathise, and letting people know that they've been heard and acknowledged is probably an important part of active listening.
Yeah, I think so. And as you're saying, it's really core to so many of our interactions. Any other final? Oh, yeah.
I have a question actually, just what we're talking about that. It's just about active listening as a whole. I'm finding a lot of times there is an intermediary between the designer and the board of directors. So what will happen is we will present to someone, they will go, oh yeah, that's great guys. I'll get back to you in a week when we've talked to the board. And then that positivity disappears. Come back and say, no, we don't like it. And at that point, you can't do any active listening because it's a distant, faceless entity. And if you say, what was it specifically that turned you off with the design? You're talking to an intermediary then. And they go, I don't really know. We just didn't like it. And you go,
That's really difficult.
So that's listening's not the problem for me per se. It's actually having someone to listen to. I would love to actually get face to face with my stakeholders more.
Yeah, that sounds really difficult because you lose that chance to communicate the way you want to and ask the direct questions. That would be great, wouldn't it, if you were able to speak with the board and get that immediate feedback of, is this resonating or not? And if not, why not?
Crazy structure.
Imagine.
It's just the way it happens. It's crazy. That's like, why duplicate the message? That's having 2 meetings. Having 4 meetings. The thing is, the decision makers aren't actually present to make decisions at key moments.
Ask the questions of the person who can answer them.
Yeah, I mean, as professional graphic
Do you want me to wrap it up?
Yeah, and as service designers, I'm sitting going, why having that meeting when the decision makers aren't in the room?
Oh, it is, isn't it? There's a lot of politics, isn't there, in all our presentations and the communications. A very layered topic. But I suppose in the times when we do get to speak with the stakeholders, or users maybe even, but when we do get some direct feedback, a good takeaway, I think, from this from this talk would be around next time you get some pushback, I'd like you to think about resisting jumping into defending more and explaining in more detail, because that's really the automatic thing that we do. But maybe to ask yourself, oh, what viewpoint am I not seeing yet? And so I don't know if anyone has any final questions. I know we're getting quite close on time, but if this has prompted any questions, or you're wondering a bit more about how to put the techniques into practice. Yeah.
Would you say that active listening can almost take on various different forms? So as a designer, we have quite a vast array of skills, especially with dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
And my personal experience when dealing with stakeholders, especially ones that are quite opinionated and are not open to listening, or if there has been a similar issue to what you kind of explained in your own experience, it's hard to kind of break down that barrier again. So personally, I find almost some of the feedback, I might not always agree with the feedback, but to almost kind of humour it sometimes, particularly if you're maybe in a position where you're an in-house designer for a company, or it's a client or stakeholders you're going to be working with for a long period of time. It's almost like a bit of a journey to kind of start to develop that trust to get to that point where they do feel like they're heard. But I suppose there's a bit of a balancing act that you don't want to just push pixels around the screen, you want to actively be a designer. But would you say it is a bit more of there's a couple of different ways that we can actively listen as designers?
I think so. I think that was a really good way of putting it, like that you could go on a journey with that person. If this is someone you're going to be working with for a while, like doing what they want might not be the most natural thing, but if it helps you to sort of be able to ask the questions next time, or build the trust, or perhaps build some of that defense over up a little bit of time. But yeah, going on a journey with them, I think, is a really a key part. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. Really great. I like this is a particular topic of interest for me. I think it's fundamental to what we're doing. So I'm really glad that you explained it so succinct and eloquently there.
Well, thank you.
In terms of teaching active listening within teams and whatnot, sort of two parts to this. Tell us a little bit more about that. Have you ever used, I do some theatre stuff, right, and I think people should be, a great team building exercise would be get people to work to do a little play together, because they'd have to start listening to each other. Right? Have you any experience of using that type of theatre in training people, or how do you train people to actively listen?
I think that's a really good point about training it, about training the people around you, especially if you observe the team. I think they'd really benefit from it. I think the first thing to do is to be demonstrating it yourself, especially if you're in a lead position where they might look up to you and they see it get results. But I think one presentation doesn't tend to solve it, and then everyone goes away being great active listeners. It's a little thing that you can sort of coach them along the way, just little bits of feedback, or just encouraging your team to be asking questions is a really key part. I think that's really fundamental. I think most designers are really keen to be empathetic. They already are, probably just getting into the profession in the first place. So helping to sort of coach the things that they already know they want to be good at and out of them.
There's a free book, Michael, called This is Service Design Doing Methods. And one of the methods is investigative rehearsal, which is exactly what you're talking about, and it explains how to do it in your own. So you can test a lot. It's very good.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for engaging.
Rachel, thank you very much. Guys, thank you very much. Please leave your feedback about the event using this QR code, how to make it next time better. Thank you. See you next month.
Do you want to walk off with your microphone? Do you want
Thank you very much. Yeah.